of water. Our hearts beat to the rhythm of water. Our hearts beat to the rhythm of water.
The Women Mind the Water podcast engages artists in conversation about their work and explores their connection with the ocean. Through these stories, Women Mind the Water hopes to inspire and encourage action to protect the ocean and her creatures. Today I'm speaking with Yustina Salnikova, a designer and sculptor whose large-scale creations encourage environmental awareness and social change and transform the public spaces where they are exhibited. Yustina was instrumental in the creation of Ethyl, an 82-foot-long blue whale made from steel and plastic waste. Yustina and her co-designer hold the current Guinness Record for creating Ethyl, heralded as the world's largest recycled plastic sculpture. Welcome, Yustina. Let me start by asking about where you grew up and your journey to becoming an artist. Were you always interested in creating and building?
I am originally from Kazakhstan, Almaty, Kazakhstan, which is a country south of Russia, west of China. I was born there and came to the U.S. when I was 3 and have been living in different parts of the U.S., but most of my childhood was in Southern California, and I grew up, near the ocean there. So a lot of my interests towards the ocean and its living creatures started there, and as well as an interest for building and creating and doing art has always persisted through my life. So it's been a long journey of learning how to integrate those two, my love for all the creatures in this world, as well as ways to help them in creative ways.
So which came first, your interest in art or an interest in the environment?
That's kind of hard to say. I think they're so intertwined, and I think I've always had an interest in both, but didn't realize that I had an interest in both until I was in college, actually, when this actually really solidified. I started my scholastic career post high school, going to City College in Santa Barbara. And there I actually started my environmental world by writing an English paper actually on nuclear waste and its effects on the ocean. And from there, I just got really, really passionate and introduced to the world of environmental science and green building and green design, as well as a lot of like the social problems that align with a lot of the environmental problems. So I then went on to study at UC Berkeley and got a degree in sustainable environmental design, as well as environmental science policy and management. And through the integration of that, I've, it actually brought me back to art. Art has always been a practice, and I've always like drawn and sketched and created weird sculptures on my own since I was a young girl. But through those studies, I actually just realized how impactful a tool that like design and the creation of space and art can be, and driving social and environmental change. And it kind of solidified for me after going through those studies that instead of that one of the strongest points of activism I can engage in and a change driver I could engage in was actually building art and transforming spaces. So that's what led me to that journey.
Tell me more about your work to promote sustainability. Maybe start by defining sustainability and then how your work draws attention to the plastic waste issue.
Sustainability is just continuing our way of life and our health as a species on the planet. But I often ask like health for whom and for what, and what are we sustaining? And at this point, I'm actually not, interested in sustaining our current way of life and our current paradigm. So I'm interested more in using these methods and art as a way of transforming our narratives and transforming our society into more of a, yeah, for lack of a better term, a regenerative paradigm, or a life where we as animals on this planet are giving back to all of the beings that help us live our lives, the plants, the ocean, instead of just sustaining off of it, to actually be able to live in a relationship and be able to give back to it as well.
I'd like to know more about your collaboration with Joel Stockdill. How did that collaboration come about? Do the ideas precede the collection of the waste, or do they grow from the collection?
Joel's been making large scale art for 12 years now, on many levels, and has been working with reclaimed materials. And I was really interested on using like reclaimed materials and different materialities to create space and structures, as well as using those structures to create like environmental functions within the world. So sculpture that collects water, or sculpture that teaches or has education. And we really connected on those 2 points. And we started working together. I first started working with him as an apprentice, and learning the way he was using the trades to do that. So he's trained in carpentry and metalwork. And so at first I was working with him to develop some of those skills and to solidify my own knowledge on building large-scale structures and sculpture. And then after a year of working together in that way, we started collaborating and working on concepts together. And like, yeah, the biggest and the first big realization of that was Ethyl, the blue whale. And so, but we've both been kind of scavengers and waste nerds for a long time.
So please describe how the waste is collected, sorted, and then treated in order to be used in the construction of the piece.
So it really depends on the material we're working with and where we are building the piece, and what the process actually looks like. Each sculpture is very, very unique. And for a while we were working on the road, so we would actually go to a community and get to know the community and get to know the waste stream in that particular place, and gather materials in that area and see what's most available. So let's say like a place has a lot of recycled lumber or plastic or whatnot, and we'd make relationships with a lot of the waste carriers in that space, or the salvage yards or whatnot. And we would then, we then collect the material and we sort it according to type and size, and shape and color and all of the things. And then from there, develop like a palette to work with for the sculpture itself. So it really depends. When we do work with plastic, depending on the process of like plastic recycling we engage in, it's a little bit different because we do two different types of plastic sculpture. We do assemblage type sculpture, which is more like collage and putting things together, as well as fully recycling the material itself, which you would see is what we did for Ethyl the whale, is where we actually like created new material from material. So that comes with a way more intensive sorting process and cleaning process. But yeah, we usually get all the raw material, sort it, clean it, then cut it into the shapes we want it, and then sculpt with it.
Would you describe the process of envisioning and creating Ethyl? For example, how did you collect all the plastic needed for a life-size blue whale? How did you assemble her? And what other challenges did you face in bringing her to reality? Please, when you're discussing visual aspects of the process, describe them for anyone listening to an audio-only version.
Yeah, so Ethyl was, a project that really exceeded the scope and scale that we had ever done before at the time. So she was an amazing learning process, and our main inspiration for her was drawn from what's known as the precious plastics movement, which is actually a group that was started in Europe and the Netherlands, I believe, and has created open source DIY technology to recycle your own plastic. And they've basically taught people how to recycle plastic, and created machinery as well as tutorials, and people have been starting these DIY recycling centers around the world. So at the time when we got the commission of Ethyl was commissioned by the Monterey Bay Aquarium originally, and it was a campaign to raise awareness around plastic waste specifically. And the idea came from the fact that about 300,000 pounds of plastic waste enter the ocean every 9 minutes. So we wanted to take that statistic and actually visualize it. And so hence we brought forth the whale as how much the mass of a whale is what goes into the ocean every 9 minutes. So from that concept, we were basically tasked with creating a whale that illustrated that. And we took that opportunity to try out and to engage the precious plastics model of DIY recycling. It was a very interesting process. So we wanted to do a series of community engagements, which often is how we collect our plastic. But for this one, we needed a lot of plastic waste. We used about 5,000 pounds of plastic trash. So we actually worked with the local municipalities. We worked with Green Waste in San Francisco, or in the Bay Area primarily, and they donated a lot of the plastic waste. We were actually, at the time we were collecting waste was shortly after the national sword policy had been passed, meaning that China was no longer accepting any of our plastic waste. So the value of a barrel of plastic had significantly decreased. So recyclers were more than willing to donate plastic waste to this whale. So we actually had we picked up many bales of plastic, as well as got a couple thousand pounds delivered to our warehouse. And from there, we would have to sort every single piece and go through, because the way plastic recycling works, you can only really recycle one type of plastic with another type of the same kind. So for the whale, we decided, after doing some research, we did high density polyethylene, because at the time, it was the easiest plastic to work with with the methods that we had, as well as one of the safest to work with, because it does not off gas at its melting temperature. So we were considering all these things. So we decided to work with number 2 plastic. So we would get a bunch of barrels of what was supposedly pre-sorted number 2 high density polyethylene. And we would have to go through all of the piles and hand sort them, and look through each individual piece and find the label on the piece of waste, which to ensure that it's number 2 plastic, because if you add a different type of plastic to the recycling process, it creates an impurity in the end product. And so we have these end products here. This is one of the whale panels. So if you actually have a different type of plastic in here, it creates a weakness, and we didn't want that, because our primary concern with building the whale is we wanted to build a sculpture out of plastic that wouldn't add to any pollution, or there was like less chance of any plastic pieces breaking off and then ending up in the ocean or in the environment somewhere. So we thought if you have a solid consolidated piece that's melted together, it's much safer in the long run. So that was part of our motivation. So yeah, we would have to sort all of them, and then we would wash all of the pieces, because you have to make sure that each piece isn't have any of the products still on it. So like a milk jug, we have to rinse out all the crusty milk, any of the, we mostly use like number 2 is milk jugs and laundry detergent bottles, as well as, yeah, those are like some of the main things that number 2 plastic, or what comes in number 2 plastic. And so we went through a whole washing process, which we actually created a gray water filtration system to filter all of our water, so we could actually recycle water and dispose of it safely after all of the washing processes. And after it's washed, it has to be delabeled, and all of the labels and any extra impurities have to be cut off. And then it goes into a shredder, and then all of the plastic is shredded into granule pieces, and then it is melted and compressed, and it makes, yeah, one of these panels. And after that, we put them all together and yeah, made the whale. The whale framework was, and the way the paneling went on itself was all built to flat pack and designed to flat pack, so we could actually fit the whole whale in a 50-foot truck and pack it down so it's made to move. So we actually built it on site at our warehouse, and then we disassembled it, brought it to Crissy Field, and then reassembled it there. And then, yeah, a few months later, it was only on Crissy Field for I think 6 months total, and now it's in Santa Fe, New Mexico at the community college there. And we again flat packed it after that, shipped it to New Mexico, and reassembled it there. So it's actually, for being such a large scale piece, it's very movable.
So how long did it take to build Ethyl, and how many people were involved?
So it took a total of about 6 months to build Ethyl, and it was very rushed 6 months. And it took a total of, I mean, almost like 100 people came through. We had it was me and Joel leading the team, and we were working with our arts and management consulting firm, Building 180, who helps us with all of the logistics and all of that good stuff. And then we had a core team of about 10 people that worked with us every day. And then we had people come in and out, volunteer days. We had lots of community engagement volunteer days, and that like taught people about plastic and plastic recycling, and turned it into workshop days. So yeah, probably about 100 people total with the rotating crew, because we had to have a lot of people rotating through the 6 months. So yeah, a lot of hands and a lot of love went into Ethyl and her creation.
How is your art an expression of you as a person and your view of the world?
For me, it's really about a conversation with the material and with the earth itself through this work. And so I think it brings me closer to being in relationship with all of these things. And I think it expresses my worldview and my view of the world, in the way of, I see that in a lot of the world we're fighting narratives between what's right and wrong, and how do we create systems that allow us to live in a good way on this planet. And at a point, and I see our material world and our spatial world as a expression of our ideologies. Our cities and everything that we've built is just an expression of what we believe and what we want to have in the world. And I use art and creation and space making as that change agent. And I think that sometimes fighting ideology with ideology becomes tricky and sticky, and often that we need to touch deeper parts of our soul because that's what we're actually striving for. So for me, art is an expression of that. It's my way of being an activist and being engaged in a different way than maybe some of the more traditional ways of being.
As an artist, how does your work engage people in caring about the ocean?
I think whenever you see an animal made out of recycled waste, or especially we've been working with creating a lot of sea animals out of plastic waste. I think it reminds people of the impact they have on the ocean and their greater environment in their day-to-day lives. Especially, when you're looking at Ethyl, for me, I see all of the things I've used in those panels, even if they're jumbled up, but even like learning about the piece, you see all of the waste that you've produced in your life as a consumer, as a person.
I have been speaking with Yustina Salnikova for the Women Mind the Water podcast series. The series can be viewed on womenmindthewater.com. An audio-only version of this podcast is available on the Women Mind the Water website and on iTunes. This is Pam Ferris-Olson. Thank you for listening.
That's what we are.